We are live. That's good.
We are live, and it's good to be with you. Finally, it's been a while coming, hasn't it?
Yes, sorry, I'm just sharing it in my live chat so people can come. And that's where I usually ask questions. Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, all between the binary, everywhere, anywhere you are. Thank you for tuning in with Get Informed with YG today. I have a very special guest for you, one and only. But I always have a hard time pronouncing your name, giving that English is, and I don't know what language your name is, but he is an exceptional speaker and someone that is a geopolitical analyst, an economist, someone who has been covering the Middle East for a very long time, worked at the United Nations, um, seasoned analyst when it comes to Middle Eastern conflict. And when he suggested we could do a collaboration, I got really excited and I felt it was a great honor to have him over. So if you are here and you are just tuning in, please do me a favor. Go up, click on my name, and subscribe to him right away. He deserves your attention. He deserves you. He will be informing you and giving you details about what's going on in the Middle East and giving you a detailed perspective uh, a, from a different speaker than myself. Usually, you hear from me and Jacob and Malcolm every morning, but I love having other people join us. So, thank you for offering to do this collaboration.
Yeah, it's cool to be with you, Wajeeh. And well, tell me if I mispronounced your name as well. I mean, my name's Russian. I'm half English, half Russian. So I'm very familiar with mispronunciation, be it intentional or accidental. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'll be honest that I've always been fascinated by the Middle East. I've only been to a handful of countries, but getting to know them gradually. And I think Oman really stood out to me about 10 years ago when I first went there. I really fell in love with parts of Oman and the coastline, which is obviously probably what we're going to touch on later, the entry to the Strait of Hormuz. But yeah, I mean, I focused on the Middle East from I guess you'd say grand strategic level. So big power competition, how Russia, America, China, others sort of interact within the region and the geopolitical dimensions in that. I will always defer to people who come from the region or who have a direct affiliation with sort of the history or the micro details, right? I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on every intricate historical facet around Syria, but I am very fascinated about how Syria plays into the broader geopolitical rivalry between different nations or something. Like I remember when Assad fell, for example, I was fascinated by that, and I really got into learning about the history on the relationship to say Turkey or Israel, and the sort of the efforts by neighboring states to put pressure, the sort of the chess games around it. So yeah, with everything happening in the Middle East now, it's just it's in a permanent state of instability, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think right now Israel and Lebanon seems to be the predominant military flashpoint. I don't know if you would agree with that, but
This is certainly a very uh, historical point in the Middle East. And the Middle East has been going through a lot of changes within the last century, I would say, especially within the last 50 years. Um, I first met you on Mario Nuoful Spaces, covering the October attack from Hamas. And that was my first interaction. And we had a lot of understanding about like how that happened. And then the Iran attack happened right now, and it got really complicated. But it's interesting that you brought up Syria because my mom is Syrian, and I was involved within the Arab Spring regarding the Syrian uprising since 2011, whenever when it first started. So I'm quite, you could say, I'm quite seasoned in regards to the Syrian issue. In fact, Hafez al-Assad executed four of my mother's uncles because my grandpa used to be a judge, and he was ordered to sentence innocent people for execution, and he ended up running away to Saudi Arabia. So, in in response to that, the Syrian government sentenced several of his own brothers to the death penalty. So my family has they have history within the Syrian government. And right now we have Ahmed al-Julani that has changed his name now to Ahmed al-Shara, from a person that spent a more than a 10-year within Al-Qaeda, then entered Daesh, ISIS. Now we see him. He was the same person responsible for burning those pilots in cages. Do you remember that incident when
No.
ISIS? Yeah, he was the one responsible for that in particular incident, just to give you perspective of who he is. And now we have lifted him from the list of most wanted terrorists on the global platform, and we have changed his name, put a suit, removed the turban that he was wearing, and made him look like a civilian. And the interesting part is supposedly this is a transitional government, but we all know what kind of transitional governments we have in the Middle East. What do you make of all of that was happening in Syria from a
Well,
Western perspective?
I I was watching some historical documentaries. Just for context, I was traveling around Africa just recently. I landed about 7 a.m. today, so I'm a bit sleepy still. From people might be like, he looks a bit tired, but that's I've running on some fragmented sleep. But whilst I was traveling, I watched some documentaries on the Middle East, as you do, because I was just curious about the Yom Kippur War, the 6 Day War, and obviously the Yom Kippur War, especially from the perspective of Syria, and sort of why they felt compelled, along with Egypt, to undertake this operation, and sort of the different motivations between each, and the long-standing, therefore, historical or border tensions that have never been have always lingered ever since with the Golan Heights, and all of this after BTS takes over, ousts Assad, and then Al Shara takes over as leader. What I think is interesting is that despite every fear that the West has had, or people who are fearful that he's just going to turn it into some kind of terrorist state, he keeps making all the right moves. And so, is he genuinely a reformed person who wants to sort of secularize, democratize the country? Or is this the most convoluted, far thinking ahead plot twist, right? Are we going to wake up one day and he's actually always intended to, you know, do the very thing that people were fearful of, and it's just taken him this long to sort of, you know, put us all in a false sense of security? So I remain vigilant about Syria, but you can't deny that, you know, they're trying to sort of stabilize the country after what has been the most devastating civil war, and absolute, you know, it beggars belief when I started my education and desire to pursue sort of geopolitical analysis or international relations and stuff, Syria was obviously at the prominent. It was the civil war had just started in 2011. I went to university in 2012, changed degrees, but the point was that this was we just had the Arab Spring, Syria, and then Libya kicked off, and these were countries that were very prominent in my not necessarily studies explicitly, but sort of when you'd be using case studies of conflict analysis or insurgencies or things like that. These were countries that you would often reference. I remember I wrote a paper on Russia's actions in Syria about 4 or 5 years ago for my master's degree. So um, I'm not pretending to be an expert on the Middle East, but certainly Syria and sort of the broader, as I say, in foreign interferences was always fascinating for me, and obviously and very tragic as well. So to me, I think the situation with Syria is better because we don't have a civil war, but I certainly don't think it's over. I think that Erdogan has a lot of interest. I remember the incursion that the Ankara undertook in 2019. I happened to be in Egypt at the time and watched the tanks and some of the Turkish military rolling over to create that 2 kilometer buffer zone in northwestern Syria. Um, and that was a significant demonstration of Turkish military power, which we don't often see or haven't seen for a while. And so people are like, oh, who's the most powerful military in the Middle East? We obviously talk about Israel and Iran, but Turkey is there, and Turkey with Erdogan and this neo-Ottomanism, this idea he wants to sort of recreate the Ottoman Empire. It's very interesting. So Syria, unfortunately, is a historically significant country, but it's stuck in the middle of a very prominent Turkey to the north, Israel and its questionable foreign policy to the west. Um, it's southern Lebanon is obviously a hotspot for flashpoints now in Hezbollah, and the overall. I don't know if I'm sure some of your viewers, including you, you're familiar with the Shia Crescent, right? The whole idea of if people look up a map of the Middle East, they'll see an image of sort of the Shia Crescent, this idea of how Iran has tried to influence Middle Eastern policy by engaging or leveraging Shia communities. So through Iraq, through Syria, through Lebanon, they've tried to through proxy network, right? So the Badr, I think it's Badra organization, I forget the pronunciation, in Iraq, that's one group. Then you've got the Hezbollah, obviously, but you do have pockets of pro-Iranian groups in Syria. So all these entities, well, Assad, obviously, as a nation state. So with him gone, Hezbollah undermined, Iraq looking fragile. Iran's position has really changed in the past 2 years since we met after the events of October 7th. So yeah, Syria, I think, is unfortunately a country that has been ransacked from a civil war, but is now being interfered with in terms of its recovery by a greater foreign set of issues, i.e., the Middle Eastern conflict.
My
US.
fear is that my fear is that foreign intervention is the exact thing that will complicate Syria even further. You have Saudi Arabia that are interested in the 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 possibility of future prospects in the Syrian economy, where now they're like heavily investing in Syria. You have Turkey that wants to make sure that they have their own piece of control or hegemony over some sort of Syrian political system. And then you have Trump now that wants some sort of ventureship with the Syrian people, but that is being approached with Jared Kushner, I feel, and they're going to, pitch in the Abrahamic Accord, and they're put in a kind of a difficult situation. Um,
Yeah,
the
no,
go, I was going to ask you. We saw when Ashara first took office, and we saw as soon as his militias were able to secure different provinces, they have assassinated a lot of innocent lives. and then went on to attack the Druze community. And the Druze are still wanting their own independent sovereignty, and then you have the Kurds who are also wanting their own sovereignty. You were talking about different factions. What do you make up of that of these two factions, in addition to the Ahmed al-Shara complicated the relationship with extremism?
So there's an old image I love, of a description of what the Syrian civil war was like. Um, Basically trying to show sort of the different sides that people were on. Basically, sort of, let me see if I can find it because it's hilarious. But essentially, the Syrian civil war remains arguably the most complex um, set of sides that you've ever seen in a war of its kind. You had the Russians at one point working with the Americans against the Islamic Republic while still
Yeah.
supporting opposing sides in the SDF versus Bashar al-Assad. It was a smorgasbord. I can't find the meme that I want to show you. It's basically just the heads of the different nation states or groups. You know, um, let me see if I can actually do this properly. I'm not a natural at this, as you can see, guys. You could tell I'm not a streamer.
You can
But yeah,
take your
just
time. This is just
no,
a conversation.
no, I know I'm being facetious, but it's this one. No, it's this one. This one. So this one. So you see immediately, very clearly. So you had the GCC who supported the Free Syrian Army, who was fighting Al Qaeda, but they were also fighting Israel, but they were supported by the USA, but they were against what became BTS. It's such a mess of different sides sort of supporting, you know, you use the key up here, right? Some
Uh-huh.
supporting is the dotted blue line. Point being is that the Syrian civil war is one of the most fascinating from a analytical perspective of how you see a conventional civil war combined with guerrilla tactics, combined with insurgency, combined with limited operations from foreign parties, the different types of warfare you get, right? I just think it's fascinating. And so in my mind, I think that Israel's interests in the Southwest are the probably the biggest driver of potential problems. They used, and you mentioned the Druze. Now, a lot of is the Israelis will argue that they are coming to defend the minority groups within Syria or to defend their border interests. Now, that sounds a lot like Putin going in to defend minority Russians in the Baltics or in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, right? Fighting for an ethnic region. It sounds like a form of ethno nationalism. Now, I have my concerns about Israel's broader foreign policy. Some people talk about Greater Israel. I'm not going to go down there too much, but what I do genuinely have not as much hesitation to say is that this is a very aggressive and disruptive Israeli government. They're incredibly ultra nationalist. Ben Gvir, Smotrich, these types of people are incredibly unpleasant. Some of the things they've said about Palestinians, some of the things they've said about their own neighbors is indicative of what they really think or would like to do. And I think that their desire to continue to expand buffer zones beyond the Golan Heights, which is universally recognized as illegally occupied by the Israelis, that's a neo form of occupation. Now, this is all very, very sensitive issues because of international law, um, the complexity around sovereignty, territorial integrity, and so on. But simply put, Syria faces a difficult situation. In the northeast, you've got the Kurds, as you also mentioned, and the Kurds obviously want greater autonomy, greater self-determination, but that's impossible to get because no country is going to recognize them, and a country only becomes a country if you if other countries give it that legitimacy, right? So they've tried to, I think, work more with Al Sharaa to gain greater autonomy, to be seen as a key stakeholder in this multifaceted government. But as Lebanon has shown us, countries that are incredibly secular, right? They have a mixture of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, whatever, different perspectives and views on life, are wonderful for cultural and potential visits. I'd love to have visited Beirut before it was affected by all the issues right now, but it also makes it incredibly harder to govern because you have to keep everybody happy. Iraq is obviously the case of that. The minority Shia group under Saddam Hussein, aggravating the Sunnis and the other groups across the country. So I think Syria is the civil war, as I say, is over, but it's not out of the woods yet. And I worry that the continued foreign interferences or broader regional instabilities will inevitably trickle down into Syria. Unless al-Sharaa can keep everybody relatively happy. We've seen how they reacted to was it the Alawites? They were quite heavy-handed with some of their treatment by the BTS and other groups. Then that can create resentment and undermine his ability to govern, and therefore lead to potential conflict, internal conflict, which then becomes insurgency, and then that becomes civil war. So we go around again. But I don't think there's an appetite for that in Syria right now because of the implications from the Iran war. It's having such a regional implication that I think they want to wait out, see how that stabilizes, and then maybe they begin to put more pressure internally. Because if they go to war, I'm talking very hypothetically, right? But if we see another flare up within Syria, whilst we've already got all this chaos between the United States and Iran, Iraq looking delicate, Yemen's obviously always there with the Houthis, and of course Lebanon and Israel, I don't think that's within their interests to do that. They don't need to do it right
In your in your assessment, do you think Ahmed al-Shara, the current president of Syria, has full control of his military and militias, or do you think?
does. Not because I don't think he can command them, but because it's like Putin, right? It's your keys to power. You have to keep your law enforcement, you have to keep your military, you have to keep your finances. You have to keep those who keep you in power relatively happy. Otherwise, they'll think you're expendable. We'll replace you with someone else, or we will. It's the value of going to conflict is within our interests. The reward is greater than the risk. As I say, I don't think anything is immediate on the horizon right now, but Sharar is doing a pretty impressive job. Again, I'm not endorsing him necessarily. We have to be distinctive between what he claims to be and versus where he's come from, right? I'm not going to get ahead of myself and kid like he's some kind of completely different person. I'm very well aware of his background. But if we take him at face value, he does seem to be trying hard to unify the country, stabilize it, and offer it a brighter future. The fact that Trump lifted the sanctions or some sanctions and has allowed foreign direct investment, money to come in. That's a huge step for Syria and the Syrian people. So it's as I say, I think it's largely any country that has been ransacked by its own civil war for the best part of 20 years would be mistaken to just return to that when the broader Middle East is already in disarray. Syria needs to internally stabilize. And ultimately, because if they can demonstrate to the international community that they are more of a source of stability now, then that may well net benefit them. I don't like to put it like this, but if you are, it's like they're sort of, you stand next to someone who's less attractive to you, right? If you stand next to someone who's uglier than you're going to look like the better option, even if you're not. Syria isn't necessarily in the best position, but because it's next to the absolute disasters that are happening to its east, for example, people are going to be like, oh, well, Syria's relatively better, even though in the absolute sense, it's still unfortunately struggling. I don't know if that
That
makes
makes a
sense.
lot of sense. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
It's all about relativism.
Oh my God. When you have a lot of stake in the game, sometimes you get blinded by, titles, and you get blinded by history, and you get blinded by previous acts but your point does make sense when you put it,
Yeah,
Nick.
if I could say, there's another way we could put it, right? If I dressed like you, and I tried to represent your community and culture, I would look absolutely worse next to you, right? It just wouldn't suit me. It's saying sort of,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, we talked about Israel's expansion into the Julan, and that's where Ahmad al-Julani actually got his nickname when he was a fighter, because he was wanting to free that occupied land by Israel, and that was his promise essentially in the name. But to shift from Syria into Lebanon, we have Israel that has annexed what they have been calling the buffer zone. It was 8 to 10 kilometers to the Lafani River. But as of yesterday or as of today, they have officially passed the Lafani River. More than 1 million Lebanese have been displaced. There has been studies that have proven or shown there's direct correlation between the number of people getting displaced and the number of people dying. um, it seems like I'm not someone who pushes conspiracy theories, but the actions that Israel has taken is not helping the conspiracy theories that Arabs and Muslims had for a very long time of Greater Israel.
no,
And
it doesn't.
anytime they do something like this, it gets almost very impossible for any of those Arab leaders to consider the Abrahamic Accord as an option in within the next 5 to 10 years. Uh, why is Israel doing all of this when they could be playing a smarter ball? Like, why are they? Why have Israel been so ballsy all this time to annex people's land, and they don't care about the conspiracy theories that exist? And it seems like it's at this point catching them and biting, bite, finally catching them, biting them in the ass, where the new generation is finally going like, I don't know if I want to support this side anymore. There's that growing anti-Israeli sentiment is growing. What do you make of that?
Well, look, I mean, again, from my limited perspective on Israel, I've ironically one of the earliest things I ever talked about on my podcast, The Global Gambit, which people, yeah, I mean, we do it on Substack, we do it on YouTube, right? One of the first things we ever talked about was the Israeli election of 2023. And it was a big one because it was the first time Netanyahu had been ousted. And I think it was Naftali Bennett and the more centrist coalition had come into power. The problem was this was the same as sort of like their entire mandate was we are anti Netanyahu. Well, that's not a way to build a government because it means you don't have any policies other than a anti Netanyahu policy. Okay, well, how are you going to govern? What are you going to do with the country? So very quickly that coalition fell and Netanyahu came back. Now, regardless of what you think about Netanyahu, you cannot deny he is a cunning political operator. He knows exactly how to manipulate, maximize, influence, whatever, the political environment of not just Israel, but the United States, especially, and of course, parts of the Middle East. Now, I also would emphasize the difference between the Iranian government, the Israeli government, and the Israeli state or people. Um, I think, as I said before, that this ultra nationalist government is probably one of the biggest, if not biggest, driving forces of a large proportion of the problems facing the Middle East right now. Um, it is without question the most extreme members of that government have a greater Israel in mind. I'm not shy to say that, and I think anyone who doesn't say that is denying something that most people would admit or would recognize. They clearly, and this is because they use something called preemptive caution or preemptive measure, right? The Israelis will argue that they need to occupy a piece of land preemptively to defend themselves from an attack. Now, they've done this in Golan Heights, they've done this with Gaza, they've done this with parts of Lebanon now, right? And what they do is, or what this theory suggests is that, you preemptively strike, you preemptively move into a place and sit there, but then you just never leave. The Russians do this. It's quite a classic tactic. You preemptively are like, oh well, we're going to be attacked, or there's going to be something, so we're going to go in there to defend ourselves. But under international law, there's an idea of belligerent occupancy. That a belligerent doesn't have to be the attacking force or the defending force, rather. You can illegally occupy land, right, which you're not supposed to do. But under the pretext of preeminent or precautionary, you're doing it for your self-preservation. So the Israeli government, especially right now, use this kind of framing all the time. They preemptively have to strike Syria because they're worried that BTS and others are going to attack them, even though that's never been the case. And obviously then what happens is BTS or al-Sharaa, his coalition government, don't attack, and then the Israelis are like, well, we're here now, so we might as well just stay, right? That buffer zone that they created beyond the Golan Heights in Syria, they're still there, even though it's been 18 months since Assad was overthrown, and BTS has not shown any indications at all. No satellite imagery, no relocation of military equipment, nothing. There's no military build-up on the southern western border of Syria and Israel, demonstrating that the Syrians are going to invade and try to sort of take over or destroy Israel again, right? Not like in Yom Kippur. That's not happening. So, but the Israelis continue to occupy illegally Syrian territory. So I think there is quite a concerted amount of effort to sort of justify military action as a way to protect Israel, as a way because they need to defend the state. And what's happening in Lebanon is just the latest example of that, and the most obvious, the most egregious. They are occupying a huge swathe of land underneath the river, forcibly displacing million plus Lebanese, all under the banner of we need to destroy or incapacitate, dismantle Hezbollah, which they didn't before. Yes, the pager attack of 24 and killing Nasrallah was a big deal, but much like the operation in Iran, they haven't achieved anything. Regime change isn't changed. Hezbollah was weakened, but it wasn't eradicated. And to be honest, because most of Hezbollah is in the northeast, right? That's where the
Yes.
strongholds are. So what are they going to do? What, take out what? Physically occupy all of northeast Lebanon as well? Where does it end?
Let me take this to a little bit more controversial topic, um, especially because I'm getting a lot of people asking me this question constantly, and I do want someone else to give in their 2 cents on this.
Yeah.
What is the UN interpretation of genocide? And we all know that whatever Israel is doing, killing innocent people, is horrible. But has it reached the level of genocide? Does the like is whatever they're doing now, because this is a constant debate. We keep saying never again, but I do want someone else that has worked at the UN to give me their 2 cents on international law, and give me a little bit of a non-biased answer. Where are
I'm
we
not.
standing on this?
I'm not a lawyer. First and foremost, I'm not trained in law, but I've studied it because if you study international relations, economics, strategic studies, you and I did take a specialized in international law in institutions like the UN. So, but I'm not like, I don't have a JD or whatever. But genocide is, in its purest definition, according to the uh, Genocide Convention of 1948, intentional systematic effort to destroy a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group in whole or in part. So under international law, it is defined by specific acts committed with the intent to eradicate the group rather than just targeting individuals, right? There isn't a specific person within that group. It's just anyone and everyone. Um, Now, what's interesting is that I've had obviously I live in the UK right now. I'm based here right now after being in the US for a few years, and there's a lot of emphasis on anti-Semitism because it is a problem. Um,
Yes.
and someone I'm very close, well, my partner, she is partially Jewish, and she said that there seems to be an increasingly sort of almost Israelification of it. That sort of the Israeli, some people try to sort of talk about the genocide or the Holocaust is largely the only and best definition of it, and therefore that's the only comparison we can make. But other academics would argue that what Israel has done or been doing in Gaza, what it's attempting to do in other places, Hussein's actions in the Iraqi
Yep.
wars, Assad himself, do these constitute genocide? It's difficult. You need very, very strong evidence. You need it to be corroborated. I can't pronounce the word. Agreed upon by other, experts and clear actions. But at the end of the day, some people will never even agree that it was. Do we have camps, concentration camps, or these sort of chambers like we saw in the Second World War? Not so much, but clearly there has been a desire to um, uproot to such an extent people of certain communities in a targeted manner. So I think there is a more confident. I personally veer to. I'll just be honest. My personal opinion is that I think ethnic cleansing is pretty undisputable at this point. Genocide, it's difficult. I haven't been able to be convinced yet. I think there have been I think there have been genocidal tendencies, but I don't know if it fully represents it because,
What is
again, for it to be
what
defined
is
and reach that, it has to meet a very high level.
I was going to, the next question was going to be, what is the fine line that differentiate between ethnic cleansing and a genocide
Well,
for anyone that, like, for the general audience, you know?
ethnic cleansing is the specific removal of people, so you displace them. So quite clearly, to me, the Israeli government would like to kick all the Palestinians out of Gaza. I think that's pretty clear. I think they would just like to absorb all the land, have a simple one nation state of Israel, not split between the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Um, Quite clearly, you have other regimes across the Middle East, be them the IRGC or entities in Iraq or the Houthis that just want to see the ethnic removal of opposing groups. Right? They don't want ethnic. They don't want secularism. They don't want different strands of Islam. They want their version. ISIS, I guess, is the most extreme version. They want a monolithic style. So that's what ethnic cleansing is. It's much easier, I think, to define than genocide, because it's largely more unidimensional versus genocide. But I don't know. I mean, what do you think? I'm sure the audience have had plenty to say on this as well.
Oh, my audience is quite convinced it's a genocide, at least a large part of my audience. And they were asking me to tell them what I think, whether it was a genocide or not. And I told them I defer to the International Criminal Court and I defer to, organizations that are responsible in identifying such crimes as so. Um,
Well, on the
but
UN front, I can answer that more definitively, right? I, I'm going to be transparent to people. I know they'll feel unsatisfied perhaps with some of what I said, but I generally don't know how to feel about it. I've wrangled with it ever since we met in October 7th, right? I don't know how I feel about in the UN sense. The UN has a role of trying to answer these things in a way that nation states never will. A lot of countries, a lot of people think the UN is useless, well, or irrelevant. And I argue differently precisely because it is meant to be an objective entity. So when I worked there, I was I didn't represent a nation. I wasn't an ambassador or a diplomat for a nation state. I was an international civil servant. So I worked on projects that were funded by any kind of country. And so my allegiance was not defined by a nation's interests. And so that's where the UN is quite unique, because there's no other entity that can do that, or is supposed to. Now, of course, people from Israel have argued that the UN shows too much sympathy to the Palestinians, that it's that UNRWA, the organization in Palestine, is a sympathetic body, infiltrated with Hamas, and certainly there is evidence to say that there were people who were, I don't know, sympathetic or even just pawns to an extent. But that doesn't mean that the entire UN is sort of some kind of subjective, amoral, immoral, whatever thing. And I think that there is an effort to try to apply these definitions and concepts quite consistently. The only problem is that by the time that you've gotten that designation, it's kind of a bit redundant, right? I'll give you an example. But when the Yugoslavian wars were being assessed, right, when the tribunal was being done in The Hague in the late 90s, early 2000s, right, by the time that he was actually persecuted or whatever, prosecuted, Milosevic of Serbia, he died in jail. So he never really got to serve what he did to the Serbian people, to the ethnic minorities in Yugoslavia and in Bosnian Serbs, in the minorities. So I'm frustrated with the time scale it takes to sort of get these things recognized, right? For those people who are watching or who feel very and understandably incensed, right, outraged about what is happening with Palestine or Lebanon or where, it's very unsatisfactory to see how slow it can happen. So trust me, I'm aware of that as well.
Oh, I can only imagine how slow time is for people and Gaza who are waiting for some sort of decision, like about what's happening. I can only imagine what they're going through. But um the conflict now has been muted almost because we have a conflict that the US Iran the US Israel Iran war that's happening at the moment affected the global economy to the point where no one is paying attention to what's happening in Gaza. Even what's happening in Lebanon is being ignored for a large part. And the sole focus is on the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the global crude oil market flows through there. Uh, and we the biggest problem is the countries that we are most dependent on are dependent mostly on the energy market from the Gulf states that are flowing out of the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. I,
And
I
that,
think what
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that simply, I think what this demonstrates is sort of what some people were getting at in the comments, but also what we probably feel, right? When we want to do something as an international community or bigger powers, whatever, the West, or not even just the West, Russia, China, whoever, we can, right? So because the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, but it affects the global economy and we all want that oil, we need that oil, we want that money, etc., trade, we actually do something. But Raza and Gaza more broadly, and the whole situation with the Palestinian issue is largely people just are like, well, yeah, it's terrible, but what are we going to do? What can we do? So I think this exposes the hypocrisy of a lot of things in the Middle East, or commentators who say, well, we should be doing something, or can we define it as this? Or is it really meeting the standards of that? But then, quite clearly, what is an illegal operation by the United States, what is an absurd war of choice by Trump, all this sort of stuff. We're like, we need to get involved. We need to act. Okay. Like symbolically, the British, the French, and some others recognized Palestine as a state. Haven't really done much, unfortunately. It's you feign outrage and then you don't really do anything about it.
That's crazy, man. That's just crazy. Um, what what's the I saw you the other day doing an interview with Anas,
Yeah.
a very very intelligent guy especially when it comes to crude oil. Um, you guys must have talked about the oil flowing out of the Strait of Hormuz, and you must have talked about how oil reserves are running quite low. We are
Yeah.
now hearing that maybe from the CEO of ExxonMobil that we have 2 to 3 weeks of oil reserves left in the United States. I said 2 weeks ago we have 1 month left of oil reserved in the United States. What I know for sure that other countries have already issued emergency declarations and have been telling their people to have shorter showers, and the UN issued a warning saying that there are 363 million people under threat of hunger and starvation. Is there is there anything that can be done from the UN Security Council? And if nothing happens, what's next to the global economy? How is that does that mean that the global economy collapses for the first time in its own in history for the literally for the first time in history?
I would answer your question by thinking about something. I'm making a video on this that I'll probably post tomorrow, but simply, Rajid, I think the Trump administration, or Trump specifically, went to war because Trump was irritated with the lack of progress in the peace talks in February. Right? We can talk about the grand strategic calculations of Israel and the United States and the deeper meaning behind them always wanting to take on Iran, and that Iran has never looked weaker since October 7th, loss of its proxies, October Operation Midnight Hammer last June, the 6-day war, 12-day war, all these sorts of factors that have accumulated and made the Islamic Republic look weaker. But that's the strategic level. I think tactically, in terms of what triggered the United States to launch these operations on Saturday, February 28th, was just Trump's irritation, his impulsivity. He got fed up with the lack of talks and was like, screw it. We know that Ali Khamenei and his most senior advisors and whatever generals and stuff meet every Saturday in Tehran at this time and location. Let's hit them this time. And what has transpired is one of the stupidest wars, I think, of recent memory. In some ways, even worse than Afghanistan or Iraq for Bush, because you did actually achieve regime change. Yes, it led to civil war and absolutely obscene costs for the US economy and taxpayer. But Trump tweeted about a few hours after the initial round of strikes saying, we will achieve regime change, right? Oh, so this is about regime change. Then 2-3 weeks later, the White House releases a public communication document outlining 4 strategic objectives. Regime change wasn't one of them.
Hmm.
Interesting. It's almost like Trump outspoke. He overspoke, he overshared, and ever since the United States government have been trying to walk this back. So I think that this and all of this is because what Trump has done, and this is the core of my argument, is provide strategic clarity. It has provided the Iranians, the IRGC, with one very clear realization, which they probably knew to an extent, but I don't know whether they knew how much, which is simply their biggest asset for deterrence in the future isn't a nuclear weapon. It's the Strait of Hormuz and geography. That is their nuclear option. They don't need necessarily to get a bomb on a warhead and be like North Korea, right? North Korea doesn't have good geography. It is not in a geographically important part of the world. Iran is. And therefore, I think that they've learned that they don't need to invest billions to get more from Trump. They just need to put their finger on the pressure point that is the Strait of Hormuz and say, all right, if you don't give us greater sanctions relief, more concessions, we will up the pressure on the Strait of Hormuz again. And it's that strategic clarity that they didn't have before, or it has been given even more to them. So I think what we have right now is an MOU, right? It's a memorandum of understanding, which is a non-legal binding. That's very important, everyone. It means that there is no legal obligation. It's just a bunch of guys basically with a piece of paper saying, "Hey, we've written some shit down. This is what we agree on." You done anything about it? No, we've just written it on
And
some paper.
apparently, both of them have their own interpretation of the exact same document.
Oh,
Trump's
absolutely.
Some Trump goes, oh yeah, they won't have any more nuclear weapons. We'll destroy all of their nuclear, not nuclear. You will have destroy all of their highly enriched uranium, and they will let the Strait of Hormuz open, and they will not be charging any tolls. And the Iranian comes out and goes like, "What the fuck are you talking about? We didn't even say any of that." So exactly the exact two different opinions. I don't think that they're gonna come to any understanding anytime soon because they're both sitting on a maximalist demand. And if you put that on, any game theory, specifically the prisoner's dilemma, you both end up with the short end of the stick. And that's what we're having basically at the moment. I wanted to talk about the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf states a little bit and their relationship with the United States. The Gulf states have invested heavily in two of their own important ideologies: safety and security. And with our safety and security, our citizens follow. After our safety and security, foreign investments come over. After our safety and security, we are having tourism invited. That was the exact strategy of the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait. All of the Gulf states have used that exact strategy to welcome foreigners and their extravagant wealth to be this center point between the East and the West, since they're in the middle of the old world. Um, UAE was the best at establishing itself as that hub where Dubai has become a place for many millionaires who have been trying to avoid paying taxes in their home countries to come to Dubai and live this wealthy life. And it was the fastest growing country with millionaires in it, um, fastest country with millionaires living in it. Uh, and now they have also invested heavily in their relationship, specifically with the United States and then Europe, when it comes to their national security, where they have spent trillions of dollars over the year coming to buy batteries, buying planes, buying missiles, what tanks, whatever you can think of. They have bought it from the United States, and they have tried to acquire even nuclear weapon at some point when Bandar bin Sultan was the ambassador to the United States, and that lobbying didn't go too well. Trump, with this stupid attack, His Majesty decided to destroy almost a century of diplomacy between the United States and these Gulf states, where we have carefully built our relationship with these Gulf states on trust, not on money, on trust and security. And because of that trust and security, we were allowed to have the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, and we moved CENTERCOM into Qatar, where one fourth of Qatar became a military base for the United States. And we have some of our most strategic U.S. bases over there. Now the United States is finding itself in a dilemma. Not a dilemma, worse than a dilemma, and deep shit, where they are being essentially evicted for their safety and security out of these bases or some of these bases. And Iran is demanding that the United States would leave the Persian Arab Gulf forever. Could it has gone any worse?
Yeah, I think it could have done, but not much worse than it has. I would say, this is probably going to be the last thing I can say, Vijay, before I have to depart you for today. But I would say simply that what Trump is doing is single-handedly upending some of the biggest assets that have benefited the United States. It goes beyond the US, beyond the Middle East. As I say, this benefits China. And for those who want to read understand the full extent of this, then, look out for it on my Substack, on my YouTube tomorrow, which is simply, the United States has benefited from the petrodollar for a long time. And Trump's almost plea to the Saudis and Qataris to recognize Israel as part of the Abraham Accords demonstrates that he knows his legacy from this is not good, and that maybe he was left with a net positive view in the Middle East because he had made the Abraham Accords, which is, just objectively quite an impressive achievement. Whether or not you agree with it is another matter. From a diplomatic standpoint, it was quite an impressive degree of demonstration of craftsmanship. However, he's undone all of that with this war in Iran and the implications for the global economy. And the fact that he's trying to push the Saudis, Qataris into this, I think, is him trying to protect what remains of his legacy reputation. Get something that is worth all of this, not just a washed up version of the JCPOA or Iran nuclear deal that Obama managed before Trump pulled out of it in 2018, right? Idiocy. So, and because America has this unique relationship with the Saudis, with the Gulf states around the petrodollar, right? It has what's known as the exorbitant privilege and the exorbitant duty. So as the global reserve currency, as the bedrock of the global economy in many ways, when the economy is doing well, the US economy is doing well. When it's doing shit, America disproportionately suffers. And Trump doesn't seem to have done his economics studies because the war in Iran is going to disproportionately hurt America. Is it hurting everybody else? Yes, but it is still going to hurt America. And it's not only about the data, it's about the reputation and the normative implications, right? The way that countries look at the United States. And simply what I mean by that is that America's exorbitant privilege is being severely eroded, and which country seeks to upend it more than anyone else or to challenge it? It's good old China. So China is coming out of this looking extremely good. China doesn't have the best popularity, excuse me. They are trying very hard to improve their soft power. Hard power is military power and stuff like that. Soft power is culture, language, customs, etc., and diplomacy. And China is working very hard to try to improve its soft power with the West, with now the nation states. And the bottom line of all of this is that China doesn't really need to do anything. They just need to sit back, allow Trump to take a flamethrower to everything else, and they can just sit there and, show that, okay, we might not be your favorite people, trustworthy, but we're better than the United States, aren't we? Because at least we're not sending you all to war again, or getting involved in foreign wars, or whatever, right? Um, and as a country, if I'm a third country, a third party, and I'm like, do I want to work with a country that I have issues with, but we can at least trade? It's relatively materialistic, transactional, or with the country that can invade me, or send rockets, or supports another country that has, territorial ambitions or questionable intentions in the form of Israel. I think I know which one I'm going to go for. So yeah, the Chinese are benefiting from this greatly, and it's pretty clear to me and anyone with a half a brain cell that they've been more involved with these peace talks than anyone would admit. The Pakistanis don't suddenly have all this organization and diplomatic capability without something bigger behind it. What I'm getting at is that the Chinese, I think, have been helping and working quite closely with the Pakistanis behind the scenes on mediation effort. I think that's pretty clear. So, bring this back to the Gulf states. I mean, Pakistan signed a strategic partnership with the Saudis. China has been
That's right.
providing military equipment to Pakistan. It's all interconnected a little bit. And meanwhile, Trump just thinks that he can force the regime change of a nation state that is thousands of years old, incredibly intelligent and prideful people, and do it all under the banner of liberating the Iranian people, only to end up making it more hardline, more securitized, the Strait of Hormuz more under the control of the Iranians, who are doing better diplomatic maneuvering by engaging the Omanis and the Gulf states to find a workable solution to the Strait of Hormuz in the future. Whilst the Trump administration, yeah, no, you're going to do what we say, maximalist demands. Yeah, it's really going
Yeah.
well. So yeah, just
Wow.
I think.
While you're here, I want everyone to take a minute to go up there, click on my name, and go. You'll find Piotr right there. Please subscribe to him. He is such an expert, seasoned analyst that understands a lot of international conflict. He is an economist, and I read you're also a professor. I didn't know you were a professor, but. He's also a professor. So like I said, we're only bringing you people who have actual experience, people who understand what's going on and have spent years practicing their intelligence, that now when they're talking, it seems effortless, but when they have a lot of knowledge. I will definitely love to do this again, Piotr. I would love for you to join us and talk more about international law and the UN. There are more questions for you, but I want to respect your time. I know you needed to leave. So,
If there's any specific questions, I'll try to take the questions. I just want to I just what time? Yeah, I mean, I don't know how long you usually do your streams for. I kind of slotted an hour, assuming that's normally how long they are. But if you have more, um,
I
you know,
usually go as long as the questions are coming in and as long as we're having a good conversation. I'm not. I like to go with the flow, especially if there's a good conversation. There's no need to cut it off. But there was someone who, Teresa, she's saying, I really don't understand the Israeli claim to the land, not biblically, but since the establishment of the Israeli state. What kind of claim does Israel have over the Julan area? What kind of claim does Israel have over the Sinai region? What kind of claim does Israel has over the Lebanon area that they have recently annexed to the Levant River?
well, I mean, as I say, I would be amiss to sort of claim that I can answer all of that adequately. I think that certain parts of the land is more valuable or more historically significant than others. Lebanon, I think, has more meaningful value to the Israelis than others. But I largely think it's just from a pragmatic security standpoint. The Israelis have a desire to expand the nation, expand, where they live, for pragmatic reasons, for sort of almost like an internal buffer zone. And also just because Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, all these sorts of people, they have this, um, well, their desire to sort of claim the land and turn it into living space, right? It reminds me a little bit of what a certain someone in 1930s wanted to do with Germany, in Eastern Russia. He wanted to expand into Eastern Europe and then Russia as a place by which to make living space for certain people. I'm not claiming the exact same kind of thing, but some people have argued that the ethno-nationalistic tendencies of the Israeli government and this inherent desire to want to ethnically cleanse the land and the space surrounding Israel of any differing views, religion, and so on, puritize it, basically sanitize it, and that's sort of what they want to do. I'm not.
That's the literal word they use, sanitize.
Yeah, that I don't feel ready enough to say that enough, but clearly there are greater Israel ambitions amongst us. I think. Well, I'll be blunt. I think Smotrich, Ben Gvir. I think these two people have a very clear desire of what they want to see the Israeli state become. Netanyahu, it's unclear. I think he wants to keep Israel as powerful, but he also just wants to be in power. He wants to avoid being indicted in the Senate for his money laundering or embezzlement or whatever the hell he's done. So I don't know how much he agrees with all these things, but yeah. I did see one
Yeah,
question, someone
go
asking me
for it.
where I'm from. No, someone said I'm from. Where are you from in Russia? Brittany. I'm from. My father's from Novosibirsk, more specifically Akademgorodok, or Academy Town. So he grew up in southern Siberia, near the border with Kazakhstan. I've been a few times. Well, he was technically born in Moscow, but he grew up, spent so much time in Novosibirsk. Did his PhD in Moscow and in nuclear engineering, applied nuclear physics. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, yeah, my grandfather, his father was a statistician in the Soviet government. Worked quite a decent job actually. He was a professor. I think he did like theoretical mathematics or something. I can't remember exactly, but yeah. So I'm from that part of Russia, but I don't speak it much, unfortunately. What other questions do we have? Do I believe
Then
that the
her next question was, what's your? It's kind of an open-ended question. How do you view the Russian-Ukraine war?
Well, if you want my answer to that, we'll just have to have a conversation next time. I'm not gonna tell you until we need to have a no. This is how I do it. I prefer to keep it short and sweet. Keep 'em keen, right? Gotta tempt you guys to do live streams. So, um, needless to say, if you think I know a bit about the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine is my actual expertise. That's what I focus on because of its personal significance, but also because of the relationship to Europe and NATO. Um,
You heard him, everyone. Subscribe to him if you want to know more. You're gonna have to wait until our next episode to learn about our Russian Ukrainian conflict.
yeah. I see there's one last question. Do you believe that the US is actually acting like more of an ally to Russia? Yeah, of course it is. I don't think it's the United States as it is this Donald Trump. Ironically, I just had a conversation with someone else about this, but there's a lot of conspiracy theorists about whether Trump is a agent of the Russian government. I don't think it's that far. He's known as Krasnov. I don't think he's Krasnov, but I think he is a. I put it this way: Trump has, like Netanyahu, a a sympathy, an appreciation for strongmen, right? Putin is your pin-up strongman, someone who has centralized power in such a way to ensure that he can stay in control of the country, that he can persecute political opposition. It's what Erdogan has just done, what, in the past week, 10 days against that political opponent, the mayor, I think it was. I forget what the headline was. Um, Erdogan is a strongman. He's a version of a strongman, right? It's a spectrum. You've got Putin, you've got people like Kim Jong Un, and on the other side, Orban. I don't know. But these are people who want to centralize power, persecute political opposition, suppress free media, politicize the judiciary. Trump is doing this. Trump has done this with the U.S. government. He fired a bunch of civil servants and has replaced them with political appointees, those who are loyal or aligned to his view of things. He's tried to bypass Congress as much as possible by using executive orders. Right, executive orders are the thing that the president can leverage to try to get as much as they can through. Does it mean he can get away with everything? No, right? He's threatened to pull out from NATO. He can't do that. He can't do that unless he gets two-thirds national Congress approval under what's known as the National Authorization Act of 2024. One of the last things that Biden did when he knew that Trump may well win, he imposed this bill, which basically meant that no president can just pull out of NATO unilaterally. So all these things exhibit someone who wants to consolidate power and try to undermine the democratic institutions of their respective country. In this case, the United States. Now, the US is much more of a powerful democracy than Russia. Mainly because Russia's never really been a democracy. We can argue about a few years in the early 1990s, but realistically, it doesn't have the consolidation of checks and balances of the system that keeps the president in power, in check. I mean, is it flawless? No, but it's very difficult for Trump to run away with this. And therefore, all I'm simply trying to say is that Trump, I think, doesn't necessarily just love Russia for Russia. I think he likes Putin's way of governing. I think he likes Putin as a strongman, and he wants to be like Putin. He wants to turn the US presidency and himself into how Putin is president in Russia, replicated
I
as much
said
as.
that I said that before. I think Trump, when he visited the Middle East and when he visited any other strongmen, and he saw how like they're all yes sir, yes your highness, yes your excellency, no questions asked, like they're all like do or die, when I come from Saudi Arabia, I know that mentality, and he was very impressed with all of that.
Oh, he loves
uh
MBS. He,
Oh
he,
yeah,
he,
he's jealous
he's
of it too.
huge admirer of MBS's style of governance and all those seeming sex parties that they've had. Sorry, but some of the stuff I've read about what the family can.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely fine.
The debauchery is appalling. Wait, Wajid, what did you do to your arm, man?
Oh,
Are
I
you
had a
okay?
surgery on my left shoulder. Yeah, that's why I'm not
Oh,
dressed too nicely.
you
I
okay?
just got injured at work while lifting stuff, and tried to fix it. It didn't work with physical therapy, so I ended up actually when they went inside, it was actually pretty bad, so they had to fix it up. I see my doctor quite soon, so hopefully physical therapy is going to start soon. But that's why I wasn't quite that available when we first started talking. I just had my surgery on April 22nd, so I'm just literally recovering from the surgery and having but still keeping up the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but I hope you recover.
Much
Yeah.
appreciated. I really appreciate you. But you know, it's not quite often that you get an opportunity to collaborate with other experts who are very interested in just the facts and are wanting to educate others about the Middle East. I always say it, people have phobias about things that they don't know, and that's where it comes from. And when you don't understand the Middle East, and when you don't understand Europe, and when you don't understand Russia, you fill in the gaps with your own information. And instead of making good decisions in an election, you end up making bad decision in an election. And we end up with people like Donald Trump. So this is quite important for everyone's education. I used to do it in Arabic, but I found out that I would be doing a better job talking to Americans and Europeans about the Middle East. So again, much appreciate you. Let's do this soon. And I would love to have you put in give your last word to the audience if you have any last words.
No, thank you, Wajeeh. It's been an absolute pleasure. We did start. I didn't realize you were on Substack, and you know, for to be upfront with everybody watching, like, I have been largely focused on my YouTube. I used to work in the UN. I worked in the World Bank, and then when Trump was reelected, I actually lost my job. By this point, I had built up this podcast audibly and had a little bit of an activity on YouTube. But then some people were like, "Come on, you should do it. You look great, right? You've got awesome hair." I'm kidding. But no, I'm kidding. But they were like, why didn't you just do it on YouTube as well? Like that's where podcasts are listened to or watched as well. So it's like, oh sure, why not? So anyway, so I've mainly been active on YouTube, but now I want to really start doing more on Substack, which is why I'm delighted to be finally doing this with you. And I hope that we can do it more often. I've hosted Malcolm Nance a couple of times. I know you do as well. So maybe the three of us can do something sometime. But yeah,
Yeah.
if people want to see more of what I've said, or they even if they don't like what I've said, I think it's important. The goal with my show, or what I do, is to not just be an echo chamber. I mean, I know it sounds a bit generic, but like genuinely, people think that they speak to opposing views, but they don't. They really just sort of speak to people who kind of disagree with them, but they don't really push back. And what I'm trying to do is utilize my debating skills and as being a former diplomat to actually challenge people genuinely. If anyone is English and watching, they may have heard of BBC Hard Talk or a chap called Jeremy Paxman. These, or Andrew Neil, these are proper debaters, people who would take the time to listen to the opposite view and then be like, well, hang on, didn't you 2 years ago say this? Or wait, you just voted to do that, and actually show them up, not in a nasty sense, but actually get to the bottom of stuff like that. So my goal is to interview people. And, like I've had General David Petraeus. He oversaw the entire war in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've got I've had General Wesley Clark, who was the former Supreme Commander of NATO during the Kosovo War. We mentioned that earlier. So yeah, I'm trying to interview properly, influential people and challenge them on stuff. So if people are interested on that, then yeah, you should subscribe on here and on YouTube, and you will also therefore get to see me and Wajeeh collaborating even more. But otherwise, thanks
Yeah.
very much for taking the time, and I really appreciate being able to join you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. Um, you are welcome to sign off if you'd like. I I'm going to stick around just to see if there's any other questions for me in particular, because I usually have my own Q&A in the morning.
Oh, definitely.
But I will definitely see you soon.
Well, thanks a lot, Wajeeh, and I hope he doesn't trash talk me too much. Everybody, let me know what you really.
Yeah, well, I'll try not to mention you then. No, no, don't worry about it. I won't be trying to.
Not too much gossip, but anyway, love me a bit of gossip. Anyway, all right, guys, cheers. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Such an amazing guy. I love having intellectual conversations with people who know what the hell they're talking about. And I do want to stick around to answer some of your questions and make sure that if you have anything that you wanted to ask me, you have a chance to. I know that I have my own Q&A in the morning, so I'm gonna give you guys that opportunity. Also, make sure that you go to Piotr, subscribe to his account, whether he's on YouTube or whether he's on Twitter or whether he's on Substack. He speaks on Mario Noah space, which is considered the largest Twitter spaces on X. And that's where we both met. We both met talking on Mario Noah, but he's an expert. He knows what the hell he's talking about. And when I want to give you guys a perspective from a different person, I like to bring in someone who knows what they're talking about. If you guys have contact with other influential people who you want me to interview, I see some of you like suggesting names. I I did this collaboration because I know Piotr. I've been reaching out to others. It's kind of been a little difficult to get the collaborations done. But if you comment on their Substack or live stream and encourage your favorite podcasters to collaborate with me, it kind of gives them an idea that there's someone named Wajeeh Lion that we should do a collaboration with. But if they never hear about me from you guys, it becomes a little bit weird for me to be the person always reaching out and asking to do the collaboration. It becomes a little bit too desperate. Almost as cute as YG. Don't let him hear you now. What effect will the new attacks on Kuwait have? That will put more pressure on the United States to end the war sooner. People are sick and tired of this war, especially like the Gulf states. And as long as we are, in this war, ignoring them, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. YG's followers, though, it was a good idea. Wajahat. Yes, I would love to work with Wajahat. And take a minute to support my Substack. If you can become a paid subscriber, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. My subscription is actually quite affordable, if not the cheapest subscription on Substack. It's $5 a month or $35 a year, making it really affordable. Uh, that goes directly in helping us making this content more and more and doing this full time. So we are focused on making this happen. I already talked about what kind of effect will this have from Kuwait. Where do a million Lebanese people go to? They sleep in the streets, they sleep in tents. Some of them are lucky to go to their, distant family member houses. But Lebanon is in a difficult situation, and they have been struggling before the war, nevertheless, during this war. And these attacks are only putting more lives in danger, increasing the chance of people having hunger, and increasing the probability of people dying, not having access to healthcare, not having access to electricity, not having access to clean water, not having access to bathroom, not having access. All of that starts playing effect on families and losing access to education, even though it's summertime. But if it continue, like you could just imagine, this war has been happening already for 100 days. Uh, so yeah, it's not looking good. What does the writing on your microphone say? It says, "Sir Wajeeh, the gay lion." That's my seal. And I am a sir, yes, because I'm a descendant of the prophet. My title is sir. But Americans don't care about those type of titles. Temporary tattoos. No, not a knight. Descendants of the prophets, their titles are sirs. From that's just the title. They don't get knighted, but I have not been knighted yet. No, maybe by the queen someday or the king. You know, we don't have a queen now. Although I would have mixed feelings about being knighted. Are you going to put your seal on a mug and other merch? It is coming on the way. I am sorry that the merch is coming, slowly, step by step, but we're testing products. So I figured we start with the certain products and then we start dropping them one by one all the time and making them more available for everyone. I'm also trying to see other options, and I'm trying to find a content creator business manager who can help us get like candles and some cool other products that you could have at home, light it up. Yep, have some hats, other stuff like that. It's in the works. It's in the works. Send us the Arabic alphabet so we can write our names. Oh, we'll see what I could do about that. Yeah, we should care about people as individuals. I'm really into seals to the point where I paid a Japanese seal maker to make me a seal in Japanese, but I ended up not liking it after I spent a lot of money on it. It's supposed to be like a samurai ready to serve, but I'm like, I thought about it. I'm like, but I'm not a samurai. I'm ready to serve, but I'm not a samurai. And I paid a lot of money on it. I'm pretty sure I can't get a refund on it. So, now I'm thinking maybe I should have, asked for a different seal that has a different. I'm just obsessed. I'm so old soul. I have my own wax seals, and I used to do calligraphy before I injured my right hand. Chris Huggs. Um, I'm not in touch with Chris Hogg. No, I'll reach out to him. And you know who is also a good one to reach out to from the younger generation? David Hogg from the Orlando school, not Orlando, from the school shooting. I forgot which school. And now he is in the Democratic Party. I think we need to have some of these grassroots organizers visiting us and talking. Middle Eastern study. No, you can describe me as a Middle Eastern geopolitical analyst and an international human rights activist, a political dissident from Saudi Arabia. Yeah, it's the combination of those three that gives me a different perspective and an expert on Islamic extremism. Yeah. It's so weird and creepy. Who's weird and creepy? Oh yeah, the U.S. Secretary Scott Bessent. Don't say anything about him. Maybe he will take your money away now. So I understand Oman should be neutral. Conflict solves. Understand why? Oman has been trying to show the world that they are nonpartisan and that they're a country of peace. And because they don't interfere in other countries' politics or conflict, they should be, you know, they should be okay, and they should be like there's most chances that they won't be involved in any conflict. But now that's proving kind of difficult. Will you write our names in Arabic on our merch if we purchase? That would be a little bit hard to do one by one, although that is a good idea for the future. That's a good idea for the future. Once I have communication with, maybe I will talk to Michael Matton, or was it Greg? Who's the one that has a printing company? We'll talk to them and see if they can help us out, do, limited edition for paid subscribers and premium members merch with your name written in Arabic. Why not? That sounds like a good idea. But that may have to go through someone else uh, to make it a little bit easier. But while you're at it, we still have hoodies and t-shirts. It's the first merch that I dropped. And we have mugs now. You can buy your coffee mug in different sizes and different colors. I hope you like what we have to offer. Almost right. Brittany here, Brittany. What are the Israeli population think? Is it divided? Is very much divided. Very much divided. Sounds that I have to get my hoodie and mug today. Hoodies on might have you guys might have maybe 10 days or less left to get your hoodies and t-shirts. We'll make another drop, but the first campaign you have few days left to get your hoodies and t-shirts until June something. You have another week, I think. But I appreciate everyone that's been supporting the merch campaign. I appreciate everyone that is. There's a lot of places that do make jewelry. Why time limited? The reason it's time limited is because I'm working with a company called Bonfire, and they do so in order for me to make it cheaper for you guys to purchase them, they sell them in bulks, meaning they wait for all of your orders to come in. And after they have a good idea of how many orders are in, they make them in bulk and then they ship them all out. That way it comes out a little cheaper for you guys instead of having it ordered right away and made and sent. I want it to be a little bit more economical. And the way it was going to be a little bit more economical was if I um, do it in bulk. And that means that the campaign can be no longer than 20 days long. That's just how long they allow me to do each campaign. So it's a 20-day long. You put in your order, you wait 20 days, and then they make them and send them all out. How are things in Minnesota as regards to immigration crackdown? Unfortunately, it's still happening. ICE is still existing and working. Grassroots organizers are keeping their eyes open. Um, but it's better than before in terms of numbers of people on the ground. Treatment of immigrants is still horrible. What's even worse in our Twin Cities is how we don't have a place for the houseless community. We shuffle them from one corner of the city to another, and every time we do so, we take all of the things they own and throw it away. And sometimes all of the things they own include their governmental documents. Uh, we need to find a place to, you know, whether it's a park, whether it's an empty old mall that gets converted with rehabilitation and housing. We need something. You can't be shuffling them around and expect the problem to go away. Also, our mayor and new mayor in Minneapolis has been a disappointment. He says, fuck ICE, but in reality, we haven't seen much actions limiting the ICE, hostilities against us. In fact, sometimes we see the city collaborate and works with ICE and surrounding immigrants and sending them away, which is very scary. So the problem isn't gone, and the issue is quite real. So I really appreciate your statement that we need to win elections by growing the base. What I have learned is that we must focus our attention on people on the political spectrum who may have voted for Trump last time, but who are closest to us. Trying to talk to the far right extreme MAGA voter is not productive. Listen, I'm not saying all of those talks are going to be productive, but again, I strongly recommend that you go get training on how you become a missionary, whether it's a YouTube class or whatever, because the job of the missionary, right? They know that they don't have the keys to convert you to whatever faith they have, but they can do all they could with love, with compassion, with understanding, with trying to hear where you come from, with a smile, even though that you could be hating on their belief, even though you could be attacking their ideology, even though you can be very disrespectful to them. Their reaction is always going to be a smile. Their reaction is always going to be some sort of like trying to understand where you come from. Not all of them, but there's the ones that are well trained and like considered experts and missionary work. You'll the ones that get sent abroad to talk to people who are not even from the same culture. Sit down and learn their tactics. All of a sudden, that is the exact tool that you need to use to talk to the far right and the far and MAGA supporters. My my speech even goes a step further. In order for you to understand where they're coming from, you need to use their terminology. Understand what their terminology actually means in your own terminology. And then you need to learn how to talk to them in a manner and a demeanor that doesn't feel like you're like lighting them up. If you talk to them in a matter where you are understanding that they may be in a cult or they may be in an ideology that they believe in. Anyone that is in a cult, once you attack their belief, once you attack their ideology, the first thing they will do is attack you. In order for you to win, you don't beat the other side, you win the other side over. So you need to change your tactics. The whole idea is that, like people on the far right, they will never find the truth. The people on the far right and MAGA supporters are never going to end up, you know, on the right path. That's just wrong. Many people just need empathy and they need someone to walk them step by step. But many of us are so used to having conversations using facts, using data, using analytics, and we drop it thinking that, oh, I just mic drop, bitch. I got you down. Like, that's not going to do nothing because you're talking to someone that is not thinking with facts. They're thinking with emotions. They're thinking with belief. They're thinking with culture. They're thinking with heritage. You think your facts are going to matter to them? It's not going to matter to them. Your science is not going to matter to them. So speak their language. The way they think is not based on fact, is based on emotions and feelings. That's why they see themselves so patriotic. They see themselves so there it's all based on their emotions. All their actions, all their decisions, all their voting is how they feel about a certain topic. Then you need to change the way you're talking to them to win them over. I've convinced people who have lived in cults. I've convinced people who have been on the far right. I have sat down with people. I grew up in in a society that's more conservative than MAGA. When I came to the United States, I came to Manhattan, Kansas, and Columbia, Missouri for my first 12 years in the United States, and then another 6 years in Kansas City. So I spent most of my time in the United States in the Bible Belt talking to conservative, talking to people who come from the Westboro Baptist Church in Topeka. Uh, uh, so I've been to Wichita. I've been to Topeka. My first job was in Topeka, Kansas, working at the Kansas State Senate for Senator Olitha Fauscuda. So like I have a good understanding from the people who support Trump and the people who come from the Bible Belt and the people who come from very conservative organizations. And I thought that these people were more liberal than me when I first came to the U.S. Piotr said something very, that puts things into perspective. If you put two people next to each other and they're good looking, you're not going to notice the difference. But if one person is ugly and one person is nice looking, you're immediately going to be like, oh, that person is good looking. But if you take the good looking away and you bring an uglier person than the person that was next to him, you're going to be like, oh, damn, this person is good looking. So it's just perspective. 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 Take a minute. Think about where you're coming from that perspective. It's all about perspective. Oh my God. As soon as I step away from the group chat, here's a link for the Chris Harris report. Thank you for the link. I usually don't click links, but I will look them up and I will find them. A friendly conversation goes a very long way. You know why? Because as soon as you, as a liberal, sit down with a very person from the far right and have a conversation from the heart, you know the first thing they will tell you? I wish everybody's like you. You got an open mind. You listen to the other side. I wish the whole rest of the country is the same way. That's the first thing they will say. You talk to someone on the far right, talk to them, with from your heart. You're one of the good ones. I wish the rest of the country just like you. That's exactly what you want to get to. That's exactly what you want to do. Sometimes, yes, and that's what make people change their heart. Yes, I'm not telling you that's all you need to do all the time, but that's what you do if you want to change hearts and minds in politics. Show them that you don't think they're garbage. Absolutely. Let's see if there are any other questions. But oh God, then you gotta work on practice. Practice makes perfect. All it takes is training. I already told you about my seal. It has my name on it. It has my name on it, Sir YG the Gay Lion. Sir, SIR, like the same thing as a knight, but not the same exact thing as a knight. Descendants of the prophet are called Sir. Lions are symbolic, yes, because they originated from Arabia, but they were extinct and hunted down. And I'm the first openly queer person from Saudi Arabia, and I've been hunted down by the Saudi government. So, lions are also considered one of the most queer animals on the planet. So it was just a good combo. So we are the return of the hunted lions. That's what it means. Oh, I'm disowned if that's what you. How am I? How do my parents feel about me being gay? Not so good. I'm supposed to be like the oldest son of the second or third oldest son. So yeah, kind of made a big problem for the tribe. I was supposed to be kidnapped and sent back to Saudi Arabia, human trafficked at some point, and I had to enter a safe house here in the U.S. So yeah, it's kind of serious. And I do have a death penalty in Saudi Arabia for being the first openly queer person from Saudi Arabia. So it does go a long way. That's why we're looking at Canada. Now I have a good community. Yeah, you guys are your guys are part of my community. I don't know if you know this, but my community, a big part of it is you guys. That's why we are here and we take care of each other. We're supposed to have a Zoom call with everyone to be able to join us here within the next week or so. We were supposed to have that last Thursday, but Mama Kay had a family emergency and we had to reschedule. Let's see if any other questions. I don't see any other questions. Well, I appreciate everyone supporting us. I appreciate you tuning in. Again, go back and subscribe to Piotr. Amazing guy, smart, knows exactly what he's talking about. We should be doing another collaboration with him again. And I hope you learned a thing or two about the Middle East today. Um, as always, thank you for tuning in. And as I like to say, مع السلامة, bye bye. وبالإنجليزي goodbye. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching a recording, like, comment, join the conversation, and then come to Substack and subscribe to us. Our paid subscription is actually very affordable, $5 a month or $35 a year. Join us, support our community, and if you can't be a paid subscriber, send me a direct DM here and on Substack with the email associated with the account, and I'm happy to provide you a full year subscription on the house. I've been having some difficulty with some of the accounts where I provided them with the subscription and somehow they've lost it. I'm communicating with Substack to figure out what's going on. Anyways, we'll see you later.